Nearly all the time when I'm writing songs, I always try and come up with a backstory for the for the song, which might not even be obvious to anybody when they read the final song, but it helps me to write it because it gives me a structure or some kind of little fairy tale that I'm dreaming up or telling, and by the time you've attached the words to it, um, it needn't bear any relationship to what the actual story is. You know, the sort of example I'd make is if you, for example, were trying to uh, do some sort of abstract painting or something, and you started out with just some crap paint by numbers picture, and you just stuck things on the paint by numbers picture, and then you took the picture away from the back of it, and you were just left with blobs, and then you develop the blobs, and you know you come up with something. You think, oh, that's interesting. Um, so I tended to work like that when I was writing the songs. All I had to go on was a CD of guitar music with no drums, no rhythm instruments at all. It was just pure guitar riffs that were arranged in just a set of different riffs, and some could have been verses, some could have been choruses, some could have been middle eights, whatever. And there were several ideas, and Roy sent me about 18, 20 different ideas. And I just clamped on a set of headphones and wandered around with a pad and a piece of paper, and sat listening over and over and over until little words started dropping in my head. You know, till the little leprechaun started talking to me. And it's the same thing that schoolboys do when they get bored in a physics lesson and they stare out the window and they have the most amazing daydreams, and you know, wow, and there I was, in my Spitfire battling World War II. It was the, chalk duster hits him on the head. Pay attention! Oh, sorry. No. Well, I'm lucky I can actually make a living out of daydreaming and staring out the window. And it's what I do when I write lyrics and write tunes. So I would be going walkabout in the snow in Montreal, for example, going into strange coffee shops and drinking far too much coffee, and just scribbling away my pad and humming the tune to myself as I was going along and seeing if it worked. And then when I got something that worked and I could remember it on a regular basis, because I can normally remember the tune in association with the words. If I can't, I figure that it's Darwinian selection and it must be crap. So, only the strongest tunes will survive that way. And by the time I got to the end of the album, I had a whole set of tunes, a whole set of words, and I could remember the lot, and I could sing them all to myself. So I was quite chuffed by that. That was the process that went on. One or two of the songs, like the very first one, as the album started to take shape, and I realised that there was a little theme going through a few things, I thought, well, if there's a theme, without trying to push it too hard, let me just bear the theme in mind and see if anything springs to mind about some of the other things. The song that first started it off, bearing in mind I had some songs already, but we'll talk about those in a sec, but the song that first started off this little journey was Navigate the Seas of the Sun. And it was one of those... it always starts with Roy phoning me up at 2 in the morning at home and going, oh, I'm having a great time and I'm having a blast and I've got all this really cool stuff. And he said, just take a listen to this. I'm always listening to stuff down at the end of the phone. And he played me this thing, and I just, the first things that came into my words were, so we go and we'll not return, we'll navigate the seas of the sun. Don't ask me why. It just sounded like they were just drifting through space on this wonderful journey. So I wrote that down, and I thought, that's a great line. And at that moment, irrational as it may seem, I thought, I bet you we've got a great album now. And it just seemed like the right time to do it. I'd been frankly, a bit gun shy of trying to do another solo album after Chemical Wedding, because regardless of how many units it sold or didn't sell, and it wasn't on a major label, and it wasn't here, there, and everywhere, I know it was one of the best albums of the year, metal albums of the year. So I'll put my foot in my mouth and stick my neck on the block and say, I know it was. And I know a lot of people agree with me, whether it's critics or other musicians or whatever. And I'm very proud of that fact. But at the same time, it's very scary, because I did an album which a lot of people were influenced by. And there's not many albums you do like that in your career. A lot of albums tend to be follow-on or catch-up and very competent. And Chemical Wedding was the first one of my solo albums that excited me as much as it excited everybody else. I mean, there are other albums like Skunk Works which I thought were pretty interesting. And which people ummed and ahed about, and some people thought they were great, and some people, couldn't stand it and everything else. But Chemical Wedding was one which was pretty universal. And so it was a tough one to follow up. And it was difficult because of the environment I was in afterwards, obviously. I was touring with Maiden, and we did a great album. I mean, Brave New World. I don't think I could have done Brave New World if I hadn't done Chemical Wedding in a funny roundabout way, because I went into Brave New World songwriting wise feeling unbelievably confident. And so anyway, so we did some great albums with Maiden after that, and obviously we did touring, and Roy was unavailable. He was off with doing the Halford album, which was superb, and now the Priest album that's got all the acclaim. But in the process, obviously, he was up against schedules, and both albums overran. And I know Roy, when he works with other people, and to some extent when he works with me, but I think a lot when he works with other people, he really pushes himself. And he finds it hard when he's not allowed to just go with the flow in terms of his ideas, because he knows instinctively that his ideas are really good. And with me, I think we're very relaxed the way we work. I first met Roy on Tears of the Dragon. On sorry, not the album, of course, wasn't called Tears of the Dragon. It was called Balls to Picasso. But the producer the assistant producer, engineer, who was working with Keith Olsen at the time, when I was sort of flailing around, scratching my noddle, thinking, how can I do metal rock? How can I do this differently? How can I break the mold here? Way back when I was, in the process of leaving Maiden, the engineer played me this band called the Tribe of Gypsies, which was Roy's band, and he'd done an album for about $20,000. I was just knocked senseless by it. I was just like, if I could quit and that band could just take my place, there would be some justice in the world, because it was just one of the most incredible records I'd ever heard in my life. And I couldn't believe that they didn't have a deal. I couldn't believe they weren't signed. I went to see them live. They were stunning. They were heart-stoppingly good. And I was just couldn't believe it. So I brought the CD over here and I played it to Rod, and he was freaking out, you know. And at the time, of course, they were doing, it wasn't metal, but it was rock. And it had this kind of like Latino flavour to it. A little bit of Santana, but there was a lot more to it than that. There was a lot of street stuff. There was a lot of really modern stuff in there. It was like Rage Against the Machine meets Santana. And I was like, God, that's it, you know. And whatever, you know. It fell through the cracks in the end. I mean, I pushed really hard, and Tribe of Gypsies actually, they had several records released, and they're still having records released, but it just doesn't seem to have quite gelled, you know.
It was a funny time that time. Actually, it was early '90s, wasn't it? It would have been.
It was a
93,
it was a bizarre time, you know. Metal was, you know, people weren't paying attention to music. They were paying attention to fads and how many bones you had stuck through your nose and how many bits of metal you had attached to your, you know, appendages and things like that. And it was really sad. Anyway, I met Roy and I said, you know, I said, you know, you're doing everything that I really love what you're doing, mate. You know, just fantastic. And he said, I'd really like to write songs with you. And I went, well, if you could write songs with me, I'd be really chuffed. So we went in and we wrote, I think we wrote about 5 or 6 songs in the first day. I was like, this feels good. Now, he also really loved Tears of the Dragon. He said, I really have to play guitar on that song. I love that song. So I ended up using his band, Tribe of Gypsies, to record Balls to Picasso. They were the band. I brought them over here to England, and in fact, I re-recorded the whole record with them. I did one version of the record with Keith Olsen and Che Baby, which was this sort of had a lot of electronic stuff on it and was really quite insipid and wimpy. And then I scrapped that one, and I spent a shed load of money bringing the whole band over to England, and we went into a big studio and we did the whole album all over again, but this time as a rock album, but with lots of percussion and sort of djembes and, you know, and congas and timbales, all kinds of mad stuff. And, you know, the only thing with it was the big mistake was I didn't let Roy produce it because I just met him, and I got talked into letting the other guy produce it. And in hindsight, that was a mistake. I should have just let Roy get on with it. But I didn't know him. I wrote the songs with him. I added a bunch of rock songs that we wrote together. 1 or 2 of the other songs survived, and we redid them. And the album has never been as heavy as it should have been. If the album was as heavy as it should have been, Chemical Wedding might have happened about 6 years earlier. Because some of the songs on there, like Cyclops and things like that, just should have been monstrously heavy. And in fact, you can hear the echo of Cyclops in the song on this album, Believille. It's not a million miles away, but Christ, what a different interpretation of similar ideas. So after that, Roy went off and actually had a career with the Tribe of Gypsies for a while, and I was really hopeful that it was going to happen. I got a different bunch of musicians and tried to form a band identity with Skunkworks, which went off in a slightly different direction. And then I came back together with Roy for Accident of Birth. And we've been together basically ever since as a little tag team, putting together my solo records. Roy was the you know, the driving force behind the whole thing, and it was the first album that he'd, I suppose, for somebody else, that he'd officially been allowed to do, but without sort of telling tales out of school, Roy has played guitar on so many records in LA. There are so many famous records that Roy Z is the guitarist on, and Roy Z's had an input on the production, and he really hasn't received a fair shake until now. And I'm really pleased that with the Priest album and one or two other things, but he still hasn't been allowed to fulfill his potential in terms of production, because some of the artists, you know, he works with still put a ball and chain on him in terms of, you know, what he's allowed to do with their sound. However, he's done a great job with the Priest sound. But that's how I met him, and that's how the relationship built up. And we've always worked in this lovely sort of little organic manner. The thing with Roy is that we're both very respectful of what I can only describe loosely as the vibe. You can batter your brains out trying to mechanically produce songs, but unless there's some magic there, unless there's some event there, unless there's the sort of the cosmic will to make a great record, you just have not got to. You might as well not bother. Best to wait until that something happens that just it's like waking up one day and you're going out with a girl, and one day you wake up and you go, I'm in love. When did that happen? But you are. And it's the same thing when you're writing an album or writing music. I know there's these guys who sit there and they say, oh yes, you just have to turn up and you just bash away churning out songs 24/7, and that's the way you do it, and it's just hard work, and it's just a mechanical process, and you know, if 1,000 monkeys at 1,000 typewriters for 1,000 years, and one of them's going to turn in Hamlet, well, maybe, but not in my universe, because I'd rather not waste my time being a mechanic. I'd rather wait for a little bit of inspiration and then throw yourself into the project. So anyway, that's how we work.
I was going to say, describe the creative process between yourself and Ryan. Basically, you're saying there is no creative process. It's just purely you both have, you know.
Yeah. Once we make I mean, Roy, because Roy has his studio in his house. If he gets time and fun, you know, he'll get up and play guitar and bash some ideas down, and if he gets on a roll, he'll put a load of ideas down, and then he'll give me a call and say, oh, I've got loads of ideas here, and I say, oh, I'll send them over, and at the right moment I'll start listening to them, and if I'm in the right frame of mind, it'll happen really, really, you know, really, really quickly. I mean, I wrote the bulk of the album in 2 weeks, which was, you know, all the choruses, lyrics, tunes, everything, and all the sort of the vision of how it would all go together. All happened in a couple of weeks whilst I was on tour with Iron Maiden. And in fact, that's the first time I've ever done that, because normally I've found being on tour to be such a distraction from writing, because there's so much stuff going on, and none of it's important, but all of it is distracting. Whether it's, you know, checking in and out of hotels and turning up here and sound checks here and interviews here and planes to catch and things like that. It's just you never get any period of time when you can just wander around and daydream. And we were lucky that last tour, round about in the winter, we got that period of time, and also in Japan. So, for example, a song like "Power of the Sun" came about. It was one of the last songs to be written, and I was wandering around Japan. I got up really, really early one morning. It was Sunday morning, so it's Sunday morning after the Saturday night before. And I had the old headphones on, and I just put on Pink Floyd. It was like Echoes, I think was the track from that whole album, and wandered around the streets of Roppongi, which is like the sort of seedy Soho type thing, and all the beggars and all the people lying in the street corners and all the drunks and the drunken Americans who were all, you know, out of their brains and falling over and abusing everybody. And it was just a real sort of Hogarthian scene in Tokyo with all this Floyd stuff. And then I put on the track that I was going to work with. And the sun was coming up, and I just thought, that's it, isn't it? This is the city life. This is the rhythm of everything in the city. And so there I was sitting in the coffee bar, and I just stared out the window and just played the track over and over and over and over again, and thought about Westminster Bridge, and thought about time-lapse photography and speeding up all these little ants going over Westminster Bridge, just like lemmings coming over, like a big wave of crap coming into the city, like a tidal wave every morning. Comes in, goes out, comes in, goes out. Doesn't matter if they die, there's still more of them, you know. And it's the sun comes up, they come in. The sun goes down, they go out. And what's left? It's like driftwood on the beach, and you get those images. You write them down. That's the words. So that was Power of the Sun, anyway. And sometimes the lyrics end up being quite a puzzle, quite enigmatic. You look at them and think, I know they mean something, but what do they mean exactly? I quite like that. I don't necessarily like, because the meaning to one person might not be the meaning to another person. But if they have meaning, they'll mean something to most people. So it's the meaning behind them that's my little personal trip. But other people's, it might be something different. I did look at the idea of space, flying, traveling. One of the ideas I had for the album title was calling it Half-Life, because what I liked was the idea that in every radioactive element has a half-life, and it's halfway towards turning into something completely different when it's at its half-life stage. And I thought, in some respects, my career, my life has been in a constant half-life, because I've always been on the cusp of turning into something else. I've never wanted to be, just the one thing. So I was going to do that, and I thought that's a bit introspective. So I can't really go there, and half-life sounds kind of like lame, and it's not really, if you have to explain it, it's not a really clear sort of message. But I thought about that, and I thought, well, half-life, science, space, try and glue, the two things together, the art and the science together, which is what Chemical Wedding was about to an extent. Blake and alchemy and occult science and religion and things. So this is a slightly more obvious way of doing things. I've seen Roy play guitar, and I've known he's been this good forever. So when people now go, God, what an amazing guitarist, it's like, where have your ears been? I mean, it's very nice, and I can't complain about it, but I'm just like, Jesus, this guy's been playing guitar like this for, where have your ears been? But of course, it hasn't been brought to people's attention. But if you listen to his guitar playing on the very first Tribe of Gypsies record, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And he's just this young kid, just, to see the stuff that he does in 30 seconds. They just sit there and go, oh, yeah. And it's just like, it just flows out of him. Like, it's like turning on a tap. It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. Never, ever, any guitarist, ever. So that's Roy. And rhythm guitar as well. His rhythm guitar is scary because he is so accurate. He's right on it. He'll go and double track himself, put like 10 tracks of guitar down. And you can't tell. He's so on it. He's so accurate with it, And it grooves. All of it grooves. That's the thing, is that this is not like some mechanical escapade with Roy. It's all got a great groove to it, And one of his... and behind it all is a really fantastic musical brain. I mean, obviously because he can play like that, but there's a lot of theory and quite deep thought goes into what he does in terms of the intervals, the tunings, the way it's put together. He's a very, very smart cookie. I wrote the songs with the guitars, phoned him up and said, you need to put some drums on these tracks. So he won't put drums on without hearing my vocals. I turn up in LA doing some Iron Maiden shows. I sang him the vocals over the drum tracks. And he went, oh, we need to change a couple of those drum tracks. And I went, who's this drummer? He said, oh, it's this guy Dave Moreno, he's just a mate. Roy has these guys and he says, oh, I know this guy, he's pretty good. And he cherry picks these incredible guys out of nowhere, out of thin air. And they're all out there, and so he's really got his finger on some amazing musicians out there in Los Angeles. Anyway, Dave Moreno. I mean, I went over after I heard that all the drums finished. I said, "Can we go meet the guy?" I would love to go, and I would love to take this out and do some gigs with it. It'd be fantastic. Not going to get the chance probably for another year or so, but I don't think that would be any block on us doing it. Just simply the fact that it's a year away, because we've got plenty of great music from Accident of Birth, through Chemical Wedding, through this album. This, of course, is the third album in a sense. So I think one of the reasons that I think it's such a great record is because it is the third album. It's the difficult third album. It's only taken 10 years, but hey. Maestro Mysteria, yeah. Yeah, I've never met him. Don't know what he looks like. He won't release photographs, but he does say that he'll introduce himself when we go over there in Italy with Maiden. I think it's fantastic. It's a great vibe. He's done keyboards and all our other stuff as well. Actually, he's the guy that did all keyboards and bits and bobs on Chemical Wedding too. It's a very loose structure, which and when it's so when we need to make something or create something, you send something off and you see what comes back with it. So we Roy sends me some guitar ideas that he's got. I send it back to him with all my vocal ideas to bring more shape to it. That goes to a drummer and he plays drums on it. We listen back, we say, oh yeah, okay, that's great, and that's a bit less of that maybe, and so a couple of tweaks on it. Then the basses are relatively straightforward because the shape of everything is there. And now you're looking for contributions which are sort of appropriate because you've got all the bones there and you've got a big map of the song. So you're looking for things that just fit with it now. But the keyboard part of it is something that's a bit of a wild card. So we let the guy have free rein. He can do what he likes because we've got as many tracks as we need in Pro Tools to muck about with it. And he can do a goth version, he can do an R&B version, he can do several versions of all kinds of things with keyboards, different sounds. And we can just pick which bits we like. We might hear something, he might hear something in the song, and we hear it and go, wow, we never thought of that. Oh, what a great idea. Yeah, great, cool. We'll do that little vibe. One of the things that makes Kill Devil Hills is the keyboards, and there's a couple of big church organs and pipe organs on the chorus, which just lift the thing. It just turns into this sound that to me it just sounds like a cathedral of sound, you know. And it's the guitars, it's the Chemical Wedding sound of the guitars, which is a whole bunch of guitar effects that Roy has all daisy chained together. It's that sound. It's the sound of the song Chemical Wedding, and it's a very characteristic sound. And we put these big soaring chiming pipe organs in with it, and it just beefs things up, you know. It's astonishing. Chemical Wedding was an attempt to take all the heaviness that was around, because there was it was unquestionable that guitar sounds had morphed out of all recognition to what was heavy in the 70s. But it seemed that people seemed to have almost lost control of the sound. That yes, the heaviness was there, but a lot of people had seemed to be unable to make them sing, make them create tunes and make it become melodic and create anything. It was easy to be aggressive and quite frankly boring. It was very difficult it seemed difficult for people to take this new set of sounds that they'd been given, almost unlimited access to sound, and control it. And so that's what we tried to do with Chemical Wedding. We tried to control it and tightly focus it on the sounds. Well, I think we had quite a lot of success with that, and because of that, we didn't want to repeat the Chemical Wedding sound on this one, but we did want to keep it in our back pocket when we felt it was appropriate, because we were pretty proud of it. We thought, that's a great sounding record. I think we turned out something good there. So we'll keep some links to it. I mean, Kill Devil Hill is one that is has that Chemical Wedding-y type sound to it, and but a lot of it is a fair bit more aggressive than Chemical Wedding, particularly the first 3 or 4 tracks. I'd say the album starts. I mean, when people hear it, obviously they'll figure it out. But the first 3 or 4 tracks are really, really heavy. Wow, you know. And then it turns into something, and then it slowly turns into this more almost like prog metal thing, culminating in Tyranny of Souls. I like that progression. I like that little journey. It's nice. I think it makes for a nice movement of moods. I think with Roy, it's on that particular song when the guitar came out, we went, it's a Floydy vibe, you know, and we both thought, well, yeah, it is. That's kind of one of their little chord progressions that they would use. and we didn't mind because it was, imitation being the sincerest form of flattery. In general, though, I think I don't look to other bands as being a source of sound or songs or things like that. I mean, Roy may. I mean, because I think for guitarists it's slightly different because they're always listening to other bands and other riffs and other sounds, and they get quite into the technical minutiae of how things are created and things like that. As a singer, I really only have access to my own feelings and stories and words and sounds I make with my voice. So I just react to whatever I hear. So when I hear Roy's interpretation of something, then I go, yeah, that's great. And then somebody says to me, he said, that's got a sort of a Slayer vibe to it. I sort of go, is it? Well, I suppose it does a bit, yeah. Oh, that's probably good then, isn't it? But I don't think of it in any shape or form that I have to go and try and make a song sound like Slayer. The guitar riff might be a bit reminiscent of it or something, but no. For that reason, I think that's why it keeps its identity.
It's more of a tip of the hat more than anything else. In some cases, perhaps you're right from Roy's side of it more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, but it always is with guitarists. I mean, I was listening to all the Maiden, or re-listening to a lot of the Maiden stuff, and it was funny how many tip of the hats you get in Maiden songs. You think that's a bit Lizzie. You think, oh, that's Deep Purple. You think, well, that's a bit of Black Sabbath. That's really quite a lot of Black Sabbath. And I remember when we were writing the songs, Children of the Damned, Children of the Sea. Oops, sorry, I mean, of course, but then again, I listen to Maiden stuff and I think, hang on a minute, Metallica, right, just a minute, Roy, But hey, that's the way it is. Music's always like that. And if you do good stuff, expect people to be influenced by it. Well, I figure if you're gonna rip something off, first of all, make sure the author's dead. Secondly, make sure he's stood the test of time. So you're not just ripping off any old crap. Make sure you're ripping off some really good stuff. So yeah, I think some of the classical stuff is good, and I love the sort of. Sometimes it uses pretty, apocalyptic language as well, and I like that. It really is dramatic. The whole thing's actually moved so far away now from each other that I don't have any thought of conflict or anything at all. I couldn't see Maiden ever doing a record like the one that I've just done as a solo album, which is a relief. Because it means that when you go and do a Maiden album, you're going to do something completely different. And particularly, I mean, Brave New World in many respects was probably closer to some of it was probably the closest album Maiden's ever done to some of my solo stuff. In a strange sort of way. The last one really quite diverse from what I've been doing, and I sort of hope that continues. Really, it's quite nice. I think. I mean, obviously we're going to be going and doing another Maiden album in a sort of year or so's time, and I shall be really intrigued to find out how we all put that one together. What we end up sounding like on the new record. Because I don't really know. It depends what we all bring to the party, and what we all come up with. I won't be able to tour this album sort of on top of it. You know, obviously we this summer we're out with Maiden. I don't think I have to tour the album right on top of the album in order to let people know it's out and promote it. I'm sure that at some point, you know, if I went out and did some shows, that there might be some people who would be interested to go see it and be kind of entertained, particularly if I could, you know, entice Roy out of the studio. Um, so, you know, we'll have to go and see. I'd quite like the idea of the odd, perhaps a small number of, you know, quite special events, perhaps some festivals or things like that. I don't see really the value of going out on a, you know, 100-date club tour, you know, of it, whether it's going to achieve anything other than, you know, wear out my vocal cords for which are my time of life, mate. I'm trying to keep them in one piece for as long as possible. I want to keep making records. Oh yeah. When I was first starting out, I mean, I completely used to rip off. I used to sort of rip off Ian Gillan a bit, but that was mainly the drinking, I think. So I used to get appallingly drunk on stage and abuse everybody and think it was cool, and then I used to listen back to this. I think no, it's not really very cool. And I do really like to run around and throw myself around a bit and really get physically involved in everything. There's not too many singers probably do it as much as I do, in truth. Sort of bit sort of hyperkinetic, all over the place. So I suppose unwittingly I've created some unique identity there, perhaps. But in my mind, lots of singers did it. But when I go and see them live, they never actually do it. But when I was replaying my imaginary concert in my head, they were all doing it. You know, I think it's because you see iconic photographs. You know, a photograph of Ozzy with all the fringes, and he's in midair with his, you know, jumping like that. And so I'm thinking, that's what he does for 90 minutes, all the time. He's like running, he's jumping, he's doing somersaults, he's bang. No. He's standing in the microphone every now and again. He does that and goes, "Oi!" Bang, and that's your lot. You know, Ian wanders up to his mic and everything else, and walks on and walks off. You know, that's it. Ian Anderson used to move around a bit, but again, all the classic ones. He's on one foot, he's twirling his flute, he's like here, he's there, and you're thinking, "Oh my God, it's like he's like Rudolph Nureyev. He's hurtling all over the stage every 5." No. But I was too stupid to take it lying down, so I decided I was going to hurtle constantly from side to side. You know, and that's just the way I am, really. People keep trying to tell me to slow down. You don't need to run around as much as you do. You know, you know, your voice is enough. I'm like, that's boring. You know. Well, you know, so a few things, obviously fall through the cracks, and you've got to, uh, you've got to prioritize things. Horrible words, isn't it? Um, you have to. That's a big fancy word for saying you have to put things in the right order, and so you have to come up with, you know, what's you know what's valuable and what gives you a bit of shape to your life, if you like. Um, uh, I'm not a competitive fencer anymore. In terms of going and running around doing competitions and all that sort of stuff. I was sort of a semi-professional fencer for quite a while, but I do it now for fun. So if I get the chance, I go fencing. I have to try and keep myself at least vaguely fit. So if I can fence and do that, great. But if not, I go down the gym if I have spare time, things like that. So that's how I deal with that. The radio show really isn't. It's not. I mean, all I have to do is find 3 hours once a week. It's not impossible to do because we pre-record it. And for the flying, I actually use, for most of the time, I use the flying as a sort of a template, if you like. Because one of the things about music is that people assume that you are, or the entertainment industry, is that people assume you're always available 24 hours a day, that you have nothing else on your mind, that nothing could be more important than you need to come in and sign some photographs at 11 o'clock. All right. And a lot of musicians would be sort of like, that's the only thing that happens to them all week. Okay. Well, I have this flying thing, and I actually fly full time. So every 28 days they give me a timetable of what my flying bits are, and I fit the rest of my life around the non-flying bits. I quite like that, because then people say, now we want you to do this. It's like, I can't do that day. Oh, you can't? No, I can do it on Friday. Oh, okay, do it Friday. And miraculously you find that things drop into place. Now, obviously there's things where you get a conflict, and so then you phone up, you say, can I swap around and do a few things, It's not that difficult to do.